the fear inside. Robin had always admired his grandfather. The older man's quiet wisdom, gentle demeanor, and calm approach to life always fascinated him. Grandpa's village was far from the noisy city where Robin lived, and there, time seemed to move slower. The air was fresh, the sound of the river constant, and the trees, birds, and mountains held stories and lessons, if one only cared to listen. One summer afternoon, as Robin strolled along with Grandpa, they passed a group of young boys who were playing near the riverbank. They were loud, boisterous, and full of energy. One boy stood out, not because he was the most physically imposing, but because of the way he carried himself. Arvid was his name, a boy known for his shouting, his aggression, and his constant need to prove himself superior to everyone else. Robin couldn't understand it. Why did Arvid need to be so loud and demanding? Grandpa must have noticed Robin's confusion, for he turned to him and spoke softly. Robin, aggression often hides a fear. When a person shouts the loudest, it's often because they are afraid of being ignored or seen as weak. Never be fooled by the noise. The loudest roar often comes from the most fragile heart. Robin nodded, though he wasn't sure if he fully understood. It was hard to imagine Arvid as anything but strong and confident. But Grandpa's words stuck with him, and he was determined to learn more. The very next day, Arvid and his friends decided to visit the river that ran through the village, just a short walk from Grandpa's house. The sun was high, and the heat of the noon sun made the cool waters of the river even more inviting. Robin decided to follow them, curious to see how the boys acted when they weren't showing off or picking fights. When they reached the riverbank, the boys began to chat with a villager who was standing nearby, a quiet man with a weathered face and kind eyes. "Man, do you have snakes or leeches in this river?" one of the boys asked, clearly hoping for a quick, simple answer. The villager didn't rush. He gave a slow, thoughtful nod and began to explain. "You see, we had a large number of snakes in this river long ago. But once there was a big flood." "You villagers are very talkative," Arvid interrupted, cutting him off impatiently. "We're in a hurry. Just tell us, yes or no, are there snakes in the river now?" The villager, unfazed by the interruption, smiled kindly and replied, "No, no snakes. The flood took care of them." The boys, satisfied with the simple answer, quickly discarded their clothes and changed into towels. With loud laughs and shouts, they ran to the water, eager to cool off. Robin, still on the bank, kept his distance. He watched quietly, reflecting on Grandpa's words about aggression and fear. As the boys splashed and swam in the river, Robin noticed something that made his heart skip a beat. From the depths of the water, a large shape began to rise. It was smooth, sleek, and unmistakable, a large, sinister head of an alligator. One of the boys, looking up, gasped. "What is that?" "An alligator," the villager called out, his voice calm and steady. The boys froze. Panic spread like wildfire. Arvid, the loudest of them all, was the first to scream. "Get out! Hurry!" He scrambled, stumbling over rocks as he raced toward the shore, leaving his friends behind. The other boys followed suit, pushing and shoving to escape the water. But there was no escaping the terror that gripped them. The alligator's head rose from the water as they scrambled up the riverbank, its eyes unblinking. The flood, it seemed, had carried the alligator from the larger river 2 miles away, and it now inhabited the very river where they had come to swim. The boys, still panicked, reached the safety of the shore, out of breath and trembling. Arvid, who had been so confident and loud just moments ago, stood at the edge of the bank, his face pale and his breath shallow. He looked around, unsure what to do, still shaken by the experience. Robin's grandfather, who had been standing quietly nearby, walked over to Robin. "You see, Robin," he said softly, "sometimes people put on a mask. They act like they are tough or confident, but in reality, they are the most afraid of all." Robin nodded slowly, understanding now what Grandpa had meant. Arvid had been the loudest and most confident, but when confronted with danger, he was the first to panic. His aggression had been a mask for his fear, a fear that had become evident when things didn't go as planned. As the boys slowly regained their composure, the villager who had warned them spoke again. "The flood brought the alligator here. It ate all the snakes. So, there's no need to worry about them anymore. But remember, if you had only listened and been patient, you would have avoided the scare." Arvid stood in silence, his earlier bravado completely gone. The loud, aggressive boy was now quiet, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and embarrassment. Robin could see that he was struggling with something deep inside, something that had always been hidden beneath his loud exterior. Robin's grandfather turned to him. "It's easy to be loud, Robin. It's easy to shout and act tough. But true strength lies in being able to face your fears without the need to scream. Arvid may act like he's not afraid, but inside, he's just like everyone else. His anger, his shouting, it's a cover-up for his own insecurities." Robin watched as Arvid and his friends slowly gathered their things and left the river. There was no more shouting, no more boasting. Just quiet, reluctant footsteps. That evening, as the sun set over the village, Robin sat with his grandfather on the porch, looking out at the peaceful river. The sounds of nature filled the air, and the village felt still, calm, and full of wisdom. Grandpa spoke again, his voice steady and sure. "Robin, aggression comes from fear, and fear comes from uncertainty. When people don't understand something, they react with anger or loudness, hoping to drown out the fear inside. But the most courageous people are the ones who can be still in the face of fear, who don't need to prove anything to anyone." Robin listened intently. He had learned an important lesson that day. Aggression was not strength. It was fear wearing a mask. True strength, he realized, came from understanding one's fears and facing them without the need for loudness or bravado. The next day, Robin saw Arvid again, though he didn't shout or boast. He was quieter, more reserved. There was something different in his eyes, perhaps a hint of understanding, or maybe even a glimpse of regret. Robin could see that Arvid had learned something important as well. Maybe the loudest people in the room weren't always the strongest. And from that day forward, Robin remembered his grandfather's wisdom. He understood that in life, there would always be people like Arvid, people who shouted to cover up their fears. But Robin knew that true strength wasn't about being the loudest. It was about being calm, understanding, and facing fears without the need for masks. As the sun set over the village once more, Robin smiled quietly, grateful for the lessons he had learned from his grandfather, and for the lessons nature itself had shown him.